Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock. Let's go over what is happening to the stock, what we can expect moving forward. And yeah, I'll give you my thoughts as per usual. So if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. That does help a lot. This is not financial advice and I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, etc., I do have a membership section on YouTube for just $3 a month where I share my posts, updates, technical analysis, etc., options flow, mainly on Tesla stocks, sometimes other stocks as well. The link is down below in the description of the video, or for $5 a month, you get access to all of that plus NVIDIA daily updates. But jumping into it, Tesla closing the day with a move down, rather, kind of lost my train of thought there. Move down 1.6%, closing at $351.50 per share, which obviously compared to the market is going to be obviously, of course, an underperformance. Now, this is off of the back end of the news that came out pretty much post hours yesterday, where essentially Elon's pay package was rejected once again by the Delaware judge. Obviously bringing in a little bit of uncertainty here, but honestly, Tesla being only down 1.6%, honestly, it's not that bad, right? I really thought that, something like that could have been a little bit more painful. I mean, that still could, of course, translate down further. There's no guarantee, of course, whatsoever, but, could have been worse, in my opinion. Could have been worse. Now, regardless, the overall thesis remains the same, right? We talked yesterday about how we are essentially sitting in, let's look at the 4-hour chart, how we are essentially sitting in this, in theory, a bullish pattern, right? That being this, of course, rising triangle pattern, right? This whole little situation we essentially find ourselves in right up here, right? This is a bullish pattern. It is a rising triangle pattern. Again, in theory, it should execute to the bullish side at some point or another as we consider, continue rather kind of consolidating and, just doing whatever we're doing in this little range right here. But ultimately, more often than not, it does break out to the upside with a pretty decent continuation. And this should, in my opinion, lead us to 385 to potentially even closer to $400 per share just off this pattern alone. And that's kind of my current thesis, right? But, like I said, as we remain inside this general vicinity here, anything can happen, right? We could still make our way lower. We could still, which we did today actually, make our way to this first main level support, right? Which was, of course, an area of resistance and support before. Now it's clearly acting as a bit of a support, this kind of 347 to 350-ish range. Pretty good. But ultimately, this is noise. The only thing that really matters to me is two things, right? The only two things I care about are this. First, if we do make our way all the way down, I want to make sure that we hold around 340. I don't want to lose 340. That's going to be very, very bearish. We lose this rising triangle, kind of, setting very obvious higher lows. And that would essentially break this trend and potentially break this pattern completely apart and really start, putting the, bull thesis, if you will, into question. That's not what we want to see. So we want to see essentially a hold and a continued showing of buyers showing up at higher lows and higher prices in general. So personally, if I see a Tesla come down to about 340 or very low 340s, let's just say that's where I get very interested, and that's where I will most likely begin my position on the specific trade. The flip side is we just break out, right? That's the flip side. We just completely break out and we start closing, in my opinion, at least. Let's see how the 1 hour was, right? Even 1 hour candles, honestly. But I think, honestly, at least like a 4-hour candle above 360 or a daily candle above 360, or to be safe, 363. 360 to 363. That $3 range is essentially that level of massive area of liquidity and resistance, right? That's what we want to break above. And that's where Tesla wants to start closing 4-hour or daily candles above. And that should, in theory, of course, play out very beautifully. Remember, I used the Apple example. Apple did that exact same thing pretty much right here. I'm actually surprised it's following through this well. This thing just seems like it's crazy unstoppable right now. But, Apple kind of did the same thing right over here. And that's kind of what you want to see on Tesla. And you want to see this continue follow through also on Tesla, assuming it, of course, comes to fruition. Obviously, it doesn't guarantee anything. It could fall apart. Tesla could break down below 340, and this whole bullish thesis falls apart. Always a possibility, which is why risk management is important. But that's going to be the main thing I'll be looking at, whichever comes first. If Tesla moved back down all the way here to the very low 340s, if that comes first, great. I'll enter the position on that. If it comes up and breaks up above 360 to 363, great. I'll enter on the strength in the breakout, right? Whichever one comes first. I don't really want to enter in the middle over here because it's a little bit too uncertain. I don't have a clear direction just yet as to what it really wants to do, because in theory you can buy here and then it comes back down here, you buy here, and then it actually ultimately still breaks, and then you have to take a bigger loss, right? So, but on the flip side, of course, if it does end up breaking up, then you entered at a better position than, of course, if you waited for the breakout. So there's always that risk versus reward scenario, but I don't like buying in this kind of right in the middle of this sort of limbo land type scenario. I'd rather buy at a very good risk versus reward or on strength. whichever one comes first. And that's kind of the main way I'm eyeballing Tesla right now. Again, if we break above 360 to 363, I expect at the very least 385, potentially even closer to $400 per share sometime in December. That would be that expectation on Tesla stock. But again, if we lose 340, then at the very least, I think we'll come back down minimum to 325. But I still wouldn't be too surprised if we ultimately come back down somewhere into the three teens to potentially still set up what could be yet another potential bullish pattern, which could actually look like this. If I just take this right here, I can copy paste this. I could put this somewhere like this right here, and we could be setting up essentially what could be a nice, long, large looking bull flag, really, right? Nice little massive move up, right? Here we go, massive move up, and then we could just be essentially kind of, you know, doing like this into a bull flag, right? Or it could be like a kind of like a bull wedge or flag, if you will, too, right? Where we could easily be also getting tighter like this for a while, and we could actually consolidate for quite some time. There is the possibility that this is roughly what happens as well, and Tesla actually doesn't do a whole lot, and it consolidates very tightly in here, kind of soaks in all that premium that probably, you know, that is coming in for the options flow on Tesla after such a move up, as it really just kind of, you know, reinvigorates itself for that next leg higher. That is also a possibility. This is why it's always really important to wait for confirmation. So that's why, again, even if we lose 340, even if this, you know, rising triangle pattern falls apart, it doesn't mean it's all over. It doesn't mean the bullish thesis is completely and utterly destroyed, because like I said, there is still one more that I pretty much literally just mentioned that is still in play. In my opinion, the bullish thesis really starts to fall apart if we lose the low that we set all the way back here on the 14th or 15th of November, which is around $310 per share roughly. That's where you don't want it to fall apart. That's where you really get, you know, worried, in my opinion, if you're a bull. And that's where at the very least we'll come back down to 285 to as low as the 260s to 270s for that much more, you know, kind of deeper and larger correction on Tesla if we lose $310 per share. So that's kind of what you want to be eyeballing, in my opinion. Those are the main overall projections, I guess you can say, for Tesla. It really just comes down to what happens first, right? There's no reason to guess. There's no reason to pretend like you know what will happen. Like I always say, let the stock do its thing. Let it, you know, mess around here. Let it, you know, kind of, you know, screw around with people that are day trading it, maybe, you know, to a certain extent. And, you know, let those levels decide it, right? Let those levels and let those breaks or holds or whatever the case may be, let them decide what the stock wants to do next and whether or not it wants to continue being bullish or maybe go a little bit more bearish, right? Again, 340 to 360 to 363, main levels to watch in the short-ish term, as early as this week, maybe early next week. I think by then we should have most likely a decision as to what we do next. Do we just straight up go up, or do we move back down, get a little bit bearish, but ultimately still potentially have this nice little bullish thesis, and that still has, you know, a potential to, you know, obviously play out pretty well, or do we even lose 310 and then ultimately have a deeper correction down all the way over here? So those are the main things I'm looking at for Tesla, really without overcomplicating it too much. Now, obviously, if I bring out probably my favorite indicator, the bands, you know, it is starting to exit the overbought territory, which is a nice sign, which is why sometimes a correction doesn't always have to be to the downside. You could always correct sideways. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. We are kind of correcting sideways, cooling off, right? And there could be more to come. There could be more to come. But Tesla just barely is exiting overbought territory on the daily chart, and the 4-hour has also exited that as well, which is a good sign to see. It is a good sign to see. However, the weekly obviously much slower, extremely overbought still, so that is still something to watch out for. That, you know, makes me a little bit more hesitant, and, you know, that's why I'm waiting for these kind of better, more confident type entries, because the weekly still is giving me a little bit of warning signs up here. Because again, I've said this before in previous videos, the weekly has been known, whenever it's got into these overbought territories, to be very, you know, baity, I guess you can say, for the bulls, which is why, you know, doesn't mean that this time has to be that case. This time could be different, absolutely. However, you know, it does warrant some caution, and that's why I'm going for a little bit more precise entries and whatnot on my trades, at least for the short term, right? At least for the short term. So anyway, that's kind of my general thesis on Tesla moving forward. Now, the last thing I'll mention quickly that also gives a little bit caution, of course, right? Because, you know, caution is warranted in my opinion. Is going to be the indicators down here. The MACD is still flip bearish, making a fresh lower low now. RSI is starting to point back down, and the stochastic is still bearish. The stochastic is still bearish despite, you know, even the last 2 days getting a nice little rally up. The stochastic is still bearish. So we definitely need to see these things start to flip back to being bullish. And in my opinion, a confident break up above 360 to 363 will most likely help these indicators go back to being bullish. Now, going over to the options flow very quickly. Tesla, let's see what's going on here. Nice little bullish flow actually into close. I like to see that. That is always a nice little sign here, right? And most of them are actually 1206. So, you know, the bulls are definitely stepping in. They I seemingly expect Tesla to get a bit of a continuation on this rally back up, at the very least back into 360. It seems like maybe get another retest. Let's see if that plays out to fruition or not. But the bulls are definitely stepping in towards the end of the day. I do like to see that. But throughout the day, definitely a bit of a mixed flow overall, not really confident in one direction or the other. So let's see how that translates into tomorrow. In terms of the confirmed options flow, Tesla unfortunately is confirmed 25 million bearish flow. So, again, a little bit of concern there, which is why, despite maybe getting a small gap up, right, which is again, when you have these kind of calls come in for a weekly, you don't need a massive move up for these calls to print a decent amount, right? But you need to happen for it to happen pretty much the next day. So could be a nice little gap up tomorrow, but if that's all we're getting, then that could be all she wrote for now. And we could still consolidate. We could still potentially move our way to 340, or at the very least the mid to low 340s. But that still would be very bullish, and that still would be something that's perfectly fine. And really, again, comes down to what breaks first. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.